Beneath the cold, churning waves of the North Sea lies a mystery thousands of years old, one that fishermen never expected to uncover. When their nets surfaced carrying Mesolithic artifacts, including a perfectly preserved deer antler harpoon still locked inside ancient peat, it was as if time itself had risen from the depths. These were not just curiosities. They were clues, whispers from a vanished world that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, a world scientists now call Doggerland. Imagine a vast landscape stretching where open water now dominates. Rolling grasslands, winding rivers, forests filled with red deer and wild boar, and human communities moving across the terrain long before the first stones of Stonehenge were lifted. That entire world disappeared as rising seas swallowed everything in their path, leaving behind only fragments scattered across the seafloor. Each new artifact hauled up by fishermen is more than an object, it is a doorway into the lives of the people who once thrived in this forgotten land. In today's story, we follow the trail of these unexpected discoveries to uncover what Doggerland really looked like, how its people lived, and what ultimately forced them to abandon their homeland forever. This ancient tale is more than history, it is a reminder of how fragile human civilizations can be in the face of a changing planet. If you are fascinated by hidden worlds, lost cultures, and the mysteries our oceans still keep, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more untold histories and extraordinary discoveries to light. Let us dive into the story beneath the waves and uncover the secrets that waited millennia to be found. As more artifacts emerged from the nets of North Sea fishermen, harpoons carved from antler, worked flints shaped by human hands, and pieces of ancient peat holding the faint outline of long-vanished vegetation, scholars realized they were not looking at debris swept in from elsewhere. These finds were fragments of a world that had once thrived where the waves now rolled. Yet, in the early days of investigation, there was no radiocarbon dating, no advanced imaging, no underwater mapping to reveal the age of the peat or the people who left these tools behind. Researchers had to rely on a quieter, more delicate form of evidence, one carried in the memory of plants long gone. They turned to pollen. When the first samples of dark, compacted peat were carefully examined, scientists noticed that it held microscopic grains, tiny capsules of information preserved for thousands of years. Each type of plant, from oak to hazel to wild grasses, released its own distinct pollen, and those grains settled into the earth during the time they were alive. By studying these microscopic clues, researchers were able to reconstruct an ancient landscape that no longer existed. It was not an empty seabed but a thriving environment filled with forests, wetlands, and meadows where animals roamed freely and human groups moved with the seasons. The peat was not formed under the sea. It was made on dry land, shaped by rivers and lakes, shaded by trees, and rich with life. The pollen told a story that matched perfectly with the artifacts pulled from the deep. The deer antler harpoon, so carefully carved, belonged to a people whose survival relied on knowledge of the hunt. Flint blades, shaped with precision, hinted at communities that crafted their tools from local stone rather than from material washed in from distant shores. As scientists pieced together these elements, the picture became clearer. This submerged territory had once been part of a vast landmass where human groups lived during the Mesolithic period, thousands of years before rising seas transformed the region forever. What began as accidental discoveries by fishermen slowly evolved into a window into an era when the North Sea basin was a living, breathing world. The pollen analysis revealed shifts in vegetation over time, showing how climate changes influenced the landscape. Dense woodlands that appeared in the pollen record indicated a warm, stable environment, rich with edible plants and game animals. As the climate grew wetter over centuries, marshlands expanded, lakes grew broader, and the peat layers thickened. Each layer recorded the passing of generations, building up a silent archive of a forgotten homeland. The more researchers studied these samples, the more they realized how complex and dynamic this ancient world had been. The plant life indicated seasonal cycles and abundant resources, which would have supported communities that moved across the terrain following herds, gathering plants, and fishing in freshwater lakes. The pollen of hazel and birch suggested the presence of nut-producing trees that provided vital food sources. Grains from meadow plants showed open stretches of land where animals grazed. Everything found in the peat aligned with what was known of Mesolithic life elsewhere in Europe. Yet this place had its own unique rhythm shaped by rivers that no longer exist and coastlines that have been erased by time. Through the careful study of pollen, scientists were able to confirm what the artifacts implied. Doggerland had been real, expansive, and once full of life. The land beneath the waves had not always been swallowed by the sea. It was a region shaped by natural forces, gradually transformed as ice melted and oceans rose. The story uncovered through these microscopic grains connected seamlessly with the tools and remnants carried to the surface, allowing researchers to recreate a world that had vanished long before the first written records. In the quiet patterns of ancient pollen, the story of a lost landscape continued to speak, bridging the gap between the people who once walked those forests and those who now seek to understand their past. As the evidence mounted, the scattered clues from the seabed began to suggest a landscape far larger and more intricate than early researchers had dared to imagine. The peat, the pollen, the harpoons, and flint tools revealed not just isolated pockets of ancient life, but the remnants of a once connected world stretching where waves now reach. It was botanist Clement Reid who first gathered these threads into a single idea, arguing that the North Sea had not always been a boundary but was once a bridge. In the early 20th century, long before the term Doggerland existed, he proposed that this region had once been a sweeping expanse of dry land linking Britain to the European continent. His insight came from observing the ancient plant remains found in coastal cliffs and dredged sediments, remains that belonged to species which could not have grown in deeply submerged environments. If these plants had once flourished in what was now the seabed, then the world in which they had lived must have been dramatically different. Reid imagined a landscape shaped by rivers and dotted with forests, a place where human groups roamed freely long before islands separated them. His ideas, bold for their time, suggested the North Sea had swallowed a homeland, leaving behind only geological hints and the artifacts preserved within patches of ancient peat. Many scientists regarded his theory with curiosity but caution, unable to test it fully with the tools available at the time. Still, his work planted a seed, one that would grow decades later when new technologies and discoveries brought ancient maps of the seafloor into sharper focus. It was archaeologist Bryony Coles who revived Reid's vision and expanded it into something far more detailed and vivid. Diving into the evidence with fresh eyes, she studied geological charts, sediment samples, and the increasing number of artifacts recovered by fishermen. Piece by piece, she reconstructed the drowned landscape, mapping out what the rivers might have looked like, tracing where hills once rose above rolling plains, and imagining the dense woodlands that supported both wildlife and early human communities. Coles named this lost world Doggerland, drawing the name from the Dogger Bank, a shallow area of the North Sea where many ancient finds had surfaced. Her reconstructions transformed Reid's early theory into a tangible, living terrain, one with meandering waterways, lakes shaped by glacial melt, and fertile lowlands that would have offered abundant resources for Mesolithic groups. In her visualizations, Doggerland became more than a submerged plateau. It was a true landmass with its own character. Herds of red deer wandered across open grasslands, while beavers and otters moved through clear rivers that carried melt water toward what was then a distant coast. Communities built seasonal shelters near lakes, fished in calm waters, gathered nuts and berries from forest edges, and followed migratory paths of animals across a landscape that stretched from what is now eastern England to the shores of Denmark and the Netherlands. The pollen analysis supported this vision. revealing forests of hazel, birch, and pine, while sediment layers indicated freshwater marshes and evolving shorelines. Cole's maps portrayed a land rich in biodiversity, shaped by environmental rhythms that nurtured human life for thousands of years. Her work also illustrated how dynamic this landscape had been. As global temperatures rose at the end of the last ice age, melting glaciers fed rivers that carved deeper channels across the plains. Lakes expanded, marshes thickened, and the earliest signs of rising sea levels slowly transformed the region. What Reed could only speculate about, Coles could now support with emerging scientific evidence. Gradually, Doggerland's days were numbered. Low-lying areas became wetlands, families moved toward higher ground, and the once vast plain began to fragment into islands. The story woven from their insights tied seamlessly into the discoveries from the seabed, revealing a world that had not simply vanished but had transitioned over centuries, leaving traces that waited beneath the waves for modern eyes to rediscover. As researchers began to examine the scattered treasures brought up by fishermen and dredging operations, a clearer picture of life in Doggerland began to emerge, one that transformed abstract maps into a lived, breathing world. On beaches and sandbanks across the North Sea, from the Zandmotor in the Netherlands to the coasts of England and Denmark, hundreds of artifacts surfaced, each carrying a story thousands of years old. Flint tools with sharpened edges, deer antler harpoons, bone points, and fragments of pottery hinted at a people skilled in shaping their environment to meet their needs. These were not merely random objects lost to the sea, but deliberate creations of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who had walked across fertile plains, fished in rivers teeming with life, and hunted the abundant wildlife of forests and wetlands. The artifacts spoke of daily life, of survival strategies honed over generations. Harpoons indicated a reliance on aquatic resources, the rivers and lakes of Doggerland teeming with fish and waterfowl that provided crucial nutrition. Flint tools, meticulously crafted and maintained, suggested the importance of hunting, processing animal hides, and building shelters, revealing a sophistication often underestimated in prehistoric societies. Bone fragments, some showing cut marks or signs of wear, offered glimpses into dietary habits and ritual practices, while occasional human remains connected the abstract past to individuals who had navigated this landscape with purpose and skill. Each discovery seemed to whisper across millennia, telling of children who played near lake shores, of families who moved with the seasons, and of communities that adapted ingeniously to a changing environment. What made these finds even more compelling was their context. Many were embedded in layers of peat and sediment that had preserved delicate organic materials, offering unprecedented insight into the ecology and culture of the time. Pollen analysis confirmed forests of hazel, birch, and pine, while microfossils and animal bones depicted wetlands rich in biodiversity. Where beavers, red deer, and migratory birds thrived, combined with the artifacts, these natural clues painted a holistic portrait of Doggerland as a vibrant ecosystem, one that supported human life not through isolation but through a sophisticated understanding of the land's resources. Archaeologists pieced together these scattered finds, creating narratives that moved beyond maps and charts to tell of actual human experiences. Tools indicated hunting strategies, social cooperation, and even trade between groups, while artifacts like decorative beads suggested cultural expression and identity. The discoveries confirmed that Doggerland was far from an empty wilderness. It was a home, a canvas upon which Mesolithic people shaped their existence. Through these relics, modern researchers could sense the rhythms of life, the ebb and flow of rivers mirrored in seasonal movements of groups, the changing forest canopy marking the timing of hunts, and the abundant resources allowing communities to flourish for centuries before rising seas began to reclaim the land. Each recovered artifact carried layers of history that deepened the connection between past and present. Tools, bones, and human remains formed a tangible link to the hunter-gatherers who had once thrived in Doggerland, confirming that the North Sea now covering this landscape had not simply erased a land but had gently submerged the traces of human ingenuity and resilience. These discoveries transformed Doggerland from a speculative idea into a vivid chapter of European prehistory, a testament to human adaptability and a reminder that beneath the waves lies a world that once pulsed with life, waiting to tell its story to those willing to listen. By the turn of the millennium, the scattered clues that had long hinted at Doggerland's existence began to coalesce into something far more tangible, as technology provided an unprecedented lens into the sunken world beneath the North Sea. For decades, fishermen and archaeologists had pieced together fragments, harpoons, flint tools, and occasional human remains, while pollen and sediment analysis painted a broad picture of forests, rivers, and wetlands. Yet, these discoveries, remarkable as they were, offered only glimpses, isolated snapshots of a landscape now lost beneath hundreds of meters of water. It was not until the 2000s that scientists, collaborating with oil and gas companies who had gathered detailed seismic surveys of the seabed, were able to translate these fragments into a cohesive, three-dimensional vision of the ancient terrain. Seismic data, originally collected to locate hydrocarbon deposits, allowed researchers to peer through layers of sediment as if the sea had been peeled back. With these high-resolution images, they could trace the courses of rivers that once meandered across fertile plains, delineate the basins of lakes that had dotted the lowlands, and identify subtle rises and hollows in the terrain that likely shaped human settlement patterns, where previously only isolated artifacts hinted at human activity. The visualization of valleys and channels suggested pathways along which Mesolithic communities might have traveled, fording streams and following migratory routes of game. The seabed revealed more than just the layout of the land. It captured the contours of life itself, showing where forests might have provided shelter, where rivers supplied fish and fresh water, and where wetlands could have offered both resources and challenges to those navigating the landscape. This seismic mapping transformed Doggerland from a theoretical construct into a landscape that could be walked through with the mind's eye. It revealed the scale and complexity of the land bridge that once connected Britain to continental Europe, a region far larger than previously imagined, stretching across modern national boundaries and encompassing diverse ecological zones. Hills, plains, and low-lying marshes were now rendered in three-dimensional relief, illustrating not only the physical geography but also the potential human strategies for survival. By overlaying the positions of recovered artifacts onto these reconstructions, archaeologists could hypothesize where hunting camps might have been established, where seasonal gatherings occurred, and how communities might have moved in response to environmental changes. Moreover, the seismic data underscored the intimate connection between Doggerland's inhabitants and their environment. Ancient riverbeds traced in the data matched patterns of animal bones and fishing implements found in dredged sediments, confirming that Mesolithic people had oriented their lives around waterways that now lie hidden beneath the waves. Lakes, once thought to be isolated or small, emerged as significant hubs of freshwater and food resources, suggesting centers of activity where tools were crafted, game was processed, and social bonds were reinforced. Even subtle ridges and depressions suggested possible defensive positions. Trade routes, ritual spaces, revealing a nuanced understanding of terrain by people whose names and faces remain unknown, but whose ingenuity resonates through their material legacy. Through the combination of artifact analysis and seismic visualization, Doggerland evolved from legend to detailed reconstruction, allowing us to envision its rivers coursing under open skies, its forests alive with wildlife, and its lakes reflecting the daily rhythms of Mesolithic life. The sunken land, once obscured beneath the North Sea, could finally be appreciated not only as a geological feature but as a dynamic stage for human history. The integration of modern technology with centuries of archaeological detective work breathed life into a lost world, confirming that Doggerland was far more than a theoretical connection between continents. It was a home, a landscape of survival, ingenuity, and adaptation, frozen in time beneath the waves yet vividly reconstructed through the lens of scientific discovery. As we trace the story of Doggerland from its discovery in peat and harpoon fragments to its full visualization beneath the North Sea, the lives of its Mesolithic inhabitants begin to emerge with surprising clarity. Archaeological sites on the edges of the submerged land, most notably Starkar in northern England, have yielded an extraordinary array of artifacts, tools, ornaments, and remnants of dwellings that reveal not only the ingenuity but also the adaptability of these early hunter-gatherer communities. Through careful excavation, archaeologists have been able to reconstruct their daily routines, crafting spears and harpoons to fish in rivers and lakes, gathering wild plants and nuts from forests, and organizing communal activities that reflect a complex social structure. Even small details, such as red ochre used for symbolic purposes, hint at cultural practices and spiritual lives that resonate across millennia, giving us a sense of connection to people whose names are lost to time, but whose creativity and resilience endure in the objects they left behind. DNA evidence adds another layer of vividness to the picture. The genome of Cheddar Man, a Mesolithic individual whose remains were found far from Doggerland itself, provides clues to the physical appearance of the people who might have inhabited this sunken land. Darker skin tone, lighter eyes, and a genetic makeup well adapted to the environmental conditions of post-Ice Age Europe. Combining these genetic insights with the artifacts and environmental reconstructions allows us to imagine a thriving culture intricately attuned to the rhythms of rivers, forests, and coastlines. A society that navigated both abundance and scarcity with skill and resourcefulness. Yet, as remarkable as this civilization was, it was ultimately transient, caught in the inexorable rise of sea levels following the Ice Age. Gradually, the fertile plains, meandering rivers, and lush wetlands of Doggerland succumbed to the advancing North Sea, and communities were forced to migrate to higher ground, leaving behind a landscape that would disappear beneath the waves. This flooding was not sudden but a drawn-out transformation that reshaped human geography in Europe, severing connections, altering migration patterns, and erasing entire ways of life. Today, the North Sea covers what was once a vibrant land where humans, animals, and forest coexisted, leaving only traces that whisper of a lost world waiting to be rediscovered through the careful work of science and imagination. As we reflect on Doggerland, we are reminded that human history is not only written in books or monuments but also beneath the earth and water, in the delicate interplay of climate, geography, and human ingenuity. Each artifact dredged from the sea, each sample analyzed, and each 3 days reconstruction of river valleys and lakes brings us closer to understanding a civilization that thrived thousands of years ago and offers a poignant perspective on the impermanence of human settlements in the face of natural forces. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the lost world of Doggerland. If you have enjoyed exploring this fascinating story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales from history's hidden corners. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an adventure beneath the waves and across the ages.